and CEO at Vula Law Consulting. Our principal focus is business and life coaching. I also I'm a speaker. I'm also a consultant with Bob Proctor, with the Proctor Gallagher Institute, principally focusing on a program called Thinking into Results. I do a few other things, but principally these are the things that I work on. I met Sam and he invited me to join Cometsa, which I felt was an honor, and here I am today. So when he asked me to talk about my experience, I thought I would title this one a bit different from just telling you what happened on the day. I'd rather thought I would talk about it from the standpoint that the people who are benefiting from the training are DJs who are going to impact lives. And so I gave this title, A Purpose Bigger Than Yourself. And I'll explain why it's a purpose bigger than yourself. Because all too often, when in my other life, I used to work a lot with media, and the media personnel, particularly the DJs, would look a bit down on themselves. They didn't raise themselves to the level that I thought they should. And over again, I would reinforce the message about the power that they have and the influence that they have. And so I thought I'll kick off with those introductory points. But I grew up in a township. And as you know, in a township, everybody knows everybody's business, right? And there was a neighbor there, a lady. I can't give you an age, but we were young people. So anyone who has children when you're young is an old person. um, and she had a small market stall where she would sell tomatoes, your oranges, your mangoes, whatever she could lay her hands on. And the principal purpose why she was doing that was to take her children through school. Her husband didn't have a great job. He was a laundry deliverer. He would cycle. In those days, he would carry people's clothes from door to door. And so there wasn't great income in the home. And so this market stall was really a big source of income for them. But you could see the way she focused on it, and that she was there summer, autumn, winter, spring. She was there 365 days, come rain, come sunshine. And the reason she did that was because she had a purpose bigger than herself. And her purpose was to send her kids to school so that they would have a life better than the life that she'd had. And so in her mind, the sacrifice was worth it. And today, as I talk to you now, I know the two kids, one is in the UK, the other is an engineer. I'm not too sure about the other two kids, but she got them from the market stall to live a life that she says, I don't want you to live my life. She's never lived that life. I don't know whether she's still alive now. But you see, when you have a purpose bigger than yourself, the sense of self goes. It's no longer about you. It's about the purpose that you're serving, the people that you're going to touch, so that when you go, you leave a legacy. People will talk about what you did for other people, not for yourself. And so when this story came up, when I had my first day in the studio, I don't know how many of you managed to listen to episode 1 of Winning God's Way. And I didn't ask you to listen to it because I was trying to convert people into Christianity. I genuinely asked you to listen to it so you could understand when I talked about why that first day was important to me. The one thing that I have learned as a coach is, and as a Christian, is in the Christian world, we have grown up being told that prayer is the answer to everything. And therefore, there's been no emphasis on goals and goal setting and acting to achieve what you want in life. My grandfather was a reverend, and his wife started a women's movement in the church. So I grew up in a church. But the one thing lacking was that thing about action, goals, and goal setting. And so when I kicked off this program, Winning God's Way, the whole idea was to say, yes, we will pray. Yes, we will read the Bible. Yes, we will do all the things that we're asked to do. But over and above that, we're going to act. We're going to set goals. We're going to set targets for ourselves, and we're going to be action oriented. So that when God comes to our help, he comes to the help of people who are actually matching, doing things that they should be doing. And so when I went on day one, the reason why it wasn't a disaster, and I'm in no way saying it was a masterpiece, far from it. I've listened to it and I said, oh man, I shouldn't have said that. But I didn't crumble because the reason I was in that studio was not for me. It was for a purpose greater than myself. I genuinely wanted to touch as many people as I could with the gospel of goals and goal setting and the need to act to achieve your goals. And so when I spoke, and eventually the series went on and on, it was because it was for something bigger than myself. Now, what has actually happened as a result of that is that there's a book coming out of that series. And so, but that's an offshoot that was never part of the plan. The plan was to teach my people how to have goals and to have a life that is bigger than themselves. Because when you set goals as a father or a mother, it's not just about you. It's about those people who come after you. And so the question will be, oh, so what has that got to do with DJs? Well, it has a lot to do with DJ because just like the doctors, the health workers that we're talking about these days so often, and similar professions, every day you're touching somebody's life. Every day you are inputting into somebody's life. Now, as a DJ, you are influencers. Now, these are words that have come out now. Influencers. Why? It's someone who exerts influence, a person who inspires or guides the actions of others. And that's what the DJ is. I said to Sam that there are times where if you go in the backwaters of our country here, there's someone in a hut somewhere, all alone. And the only company that they have with them is your voice on an instrument. And what are you saying to that person? How are you encouraging that person to live a life of purpose, to be better than they are today, to see value in life? What are you saying? What are you doing? And so as a DJ, as I said, in my other life, I used to work a lot with them and they'll say, oh, it's just a job. And I wake up and I go, it's not just a job. It is far more than just a job. You are influencing people's lives. I remember watching these movies, Spider-Man, and they have this saying that with great power comes great responsibility, and it is power. I did a quick check on the stats to try and see the listenership, and the official stats that I could really come up with was they dated back to August 2017. But it says in the 7 days prior to the date of study, Metro had 5.26 million, 5.26 million listeners. Jacaranda had 2.32, and it goes down in the number. And now with Kometsa, with streaming, etc., you're touching millions of people every week. And therefore, your purpose is to make sure that you leave them better people than they were when they started off with you. And how do you do that? By being dedicated to your job, actually going into research and talking about subjects that help people, talking about points that are painful to people, but you can help and guide them, understanding what the frustrations are there in the market. So you need to do research. And each time you communicate, each time you get people to listen to you, each time you get people to want to come back, it shows that you have got a message through. And therefore, when you live a life that's more than just you, it you have a bigger purpose than yourself. I don't know how much time I have, but I picked up a quote from one guy who is a very unlikely guy, Nick Vujicic. He suffers from a rare condition, a disorder where you have no hands, no legs, and but he's a motivational speaker and goes around. But he said one thing. He said the greatest rewards come when you give of yourself. It's about bettering the lives of others, being part of something bigger than yourself, and making a positive difference. Because as a DJ, you make a positive difference, but you can choose to be negative, and you can choose to be a run-of-the-mill kind of person. But I would like to say to you, at COMESA, you be the difference. Let people understand you to be a different station, somebody who talks and encourages, inspires people. Because all of us need a hug. And I can guarantee you, in the coaching business that we do, you meet broken people. And you don't know when you touch them. A gentle hey, thank you very much, well done. A touch on the shoulder goes a long way to change somebody's life. A program that recognizes the pains and frustrations and offers some solutions is an amazing way of getting people to look up on life and to be the best version of themselves. So it's a big responsibility. It's not just a job. It is a very big responsibility and something that I would urge guys to pick it up. And sometimes, the research that you do is just to open channels for discussion. To say, here's a topic that's trending right now. Speak to me. What do you think? And just be more like a host and arbitrator, hearing different views. But the moment you do that, you're putting that top of mind in people's mind. And you are giving them the space to debate, share different views. And in the process, obviously, that's how we grow as people. And so, yeah, that's what I thought I would share with you. I don't know how much time I have, Sam.
You have about 7 minutes still. So you have 3 minutes of your talk and maybe
okay.
5 minutes of questions.
Yeah, okay. So I always say to the people I work with that ladies always have the wiser of sayings. And I'd like to close that. There's a lady called Mariana Wright Edelson. And she I think she nailed what I'm trying to get at. And she basically said, be a good ancestor. Stand for something bigger than yourself. Add value to the earth during your sojourn. Because we're all on a journey. We come here, we do what we need to do, the curtain comes down and we're gone. But what have we done in that period? Are we being good ancestors? Are we leaving a mark in the lives of other people? And so I find that professions such as this that have impact on other people must be taken seriously. And as you do that job, as you do that work, remember that you're touching people's lives far more than you'll ever know. But it's an important job. Okay, that's what I thought I would share.
George, you were doing this as a part-time job, right?
So I was running my own consultancy, but in the process, I decided to run a program which I paid for on Radio Pulpit to talk about goals. But I was targeting a Christian community, so it ended up by chance to be Radio Pulpit. Could have been Rainbow or anything. But the point was, as I say, I grew up with a background of Christianity, and there's a heavy emphasis on the Bible, which is great. But nobody then gets the guy to say, actually set goals. When you set goals, put actions to it, move, do something. Because when you do something, that's when the action happens. But prayer then consolidates your position. And so the position that says you can just pray and things happen by themselves, that's what I was trying to get rid of. And so we ran 40 episodes, I think 40 or something episodes, up until December last year. And so I sponsored the program, and we talked about many subjects, including particularly goals.
Will that be different if you were full-time employed by Pulpit? That would be my last question, and I'll open the floor to other colleagues.
Well, I think the onus is even more on the guy who's full-time. I think you have a bigger responsibility because now you have got the time to research. You've got the time to really feed people information that you have done a good job of researching. Whereas as a part-timer, you kind of get restricted in the time available to you. So if you're a full-time, I would actually say the responsibility is even greater once you have chosen that as a profession.
Let me give the opportunity to the colleagues to ask questions. We still have some 4 minutes left. So, but they're going to have time, and George, you will be available during the mini Lekgotlas. You can pop in and out of groups. I can always allow you to visit other groups. Colleagues, let's use the remaining minutes to ask George a few questions of clarity, if you have. And Tate Munahot, you've had your hand raised.
Oh, no, sorry. For, no,
okay.
thanks. Sorry for late coming. I was battling to connect.
Okay, that's fine. Any question to George? Yes, Divesh.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. What I wanted to just mention is I went through some of the sessions on the link that was provided for George. And as he had mentioned in the beginning, he didn't want to convert anyone to Christianity. I did obviously get that sense from those posts that I went through, that there was a very strong linkage, obviously, to Christianity. But behind those linkages, I still felt there was value in the message portrayed about setting goals and being smart and the milestones that you would be setting for yourself. Just as a suggestion is, it would be more accessible to a greater audience if we adapted the strategic messages, delinking them from the Christianity portion, unless he just wanted to focus on the Christian community.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Divesh, for that. I'm glad you listened to it. So I have a YouTube page, and on that YouTube, I can share the link with Sam. I talk about success, motivation, etc., without reference to Christianity, and that's many episodes out of that. We try to do other things around that, but that one is not. So the reason why I went on Radio Pulpit with this particular one, and that's how the conversation started, was because I genuinely felt that there needs to be somebody who talks goal setting, action, outside of just reference to the Bible. Whereas if you go to my YouTube page, I talk about success principles and the mind, subconscious mind, and all that, without reference to religion, because that's where the bigger audience is, and I can impact more people, because the goal isn't to motivate simply Christians. The goal is to motivate the whole world, whoever I can touch. But because of my specific background, I needed to speak to that constituency because I felt there was something missing there.
Beautiful. I'm sure there's going to be more questions during the mini hotline. That's the whole idea. And I see the point that Divesh is mentioning. And I think you were on a Christian platform, Radio Pulpit. I guess that was the motivation why you went that route. But you are a business consultant, and I'm sure when you facilitate goal-setting workshops with private commercial businesses, you probably don't even start the session with a prayer unless you start silently, probably because we all have different beliefs. And I always pray silently that God gives me strength to face the client.
Yes.
Welcome,
No,
welcome,
yeah.
Simon, Max.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sam. It's lovely to be here. I hope you're all well.
Lovely, lovely. Yeah, you came right on point. We just had a session with Brother George, who was the first motivational speaker. So we want to consolidate more inputs from both of you so that when we break away in the next hour in what we will call the mini Lekgotla, which is basically breakaway sessions, we will have much more to reflect on. So let me respect your time. I know you are in between breaking news. We appreciate you making time to talk to us. How is everything in Washington?
It's cold, but it's actually warming up today. I'm hoping today is going to be the first reasonably warm day we've had for weeks, because I need the ice in my driveway to melt. It's like a skating rink out there. But more broadly, things are good. It's a busy day, but not a crazy day.
Yeah, in terms of the news, you said you mean.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think we're learning to respond to the new realities here now that the sort of non-stop frenzy of the Trump era has come to an end. I mean, I literally spent 4 years waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, as did many reporters here, just to glance at the phone to see what he tweeted, so that because that was going to shape my next day. And I think, invariably I would be on my commute on my way to work, and I'd glance at my phone to discover that while, in between leaving the house and arriving in my office, he'd been on Twitter again, and that had completely changed the contours of the day that lay ahead. So it's a relief to return to a slightly more stable, predictable daily basis.
So you want to say, Simon, you want to say that for the last 4 years, you guys have been lying?
We guys have been which?
You have been lying in your news broadcasting, because you were always off the point.
Well, I mean, I think, Sam, it's a really fair criticism that the media here over the last 4 years was probably much too easily led by a man with a Twitter account. And I think that the media has culpability in that frenzy. On the one hand, he's the president of the United States. Whatever he says and whatever medium he uses to communicate his message, we have to pay attention to that, because he is the most powerful man in the world, notionally. But on the other hand, his capacity to use Twitter as a means to distract everyone's attention away from issues that he didn't want everybody talking about. Don't talk about my tax returns, talk about this instead. Don't talk about my response to COVID-19 and the just shocking, we just passed the 500,000 threshold in terms of the number of deaths here. But throughout the latter stages of the Trump administration, he didn't want anybody talking about COVID-19. He wanted everybody. So he created this notion that the American presidential election had been rigged. I mean, partly as a distracting tactic. And I think that the media has to ask itself some very hard questions about the extent to which we were all, complicit in that. There's no question about that.
That's why you are here, Simon.
Well, look, it's a pleasure. Do you want me just to
Yeah, thank you very much. Just a quick welcome to colleagues that join us a little bit later. I recognize you, colleagues. Let me not waste time mentioning your names, but I've seen you coming through. Welcome. And Simon, these are what you will call, these are professionals, by the way. Let me start by saying, we have assembled a group of professionals in their own right. We have business consultants, we have got shipping agents, we have got strategists, bankers, ex-bankers, and almost every one of us here is in a particular profession. That's why the lecture is happening in the evening. And these are the people that you will call the new generation DJs in the new generation internet radio station. We must be one of the very first in South Africa, I'm sure, that has started the internet radio station on this level, and we want to take it to the next level. And these are the people that they look at their own shows as their own enterprises, and that is the model. And therefore, that will mean that they can't take it lightly and thinking that because you are a professional or you are an executive or a CEO somewhere else, you will become a CEO in the studio and trying to tell the whole world or interviewing Simon Marks. So the reason why we invited you is really to give us a motivation by sharing your story with them, and also the life of a DJ or a broadcaster in this case, and some sort of inspiration as well. And also a little bit of background about you, and I'm sure you will be able to do that. I hand over to you, Simon.
Sure, thank you, Sam, and I really appreciate the invitation to do this, and we are, I should say, very excited about your radio station's growth and launch, and it's lovely for our news to be on your air, which I think you're carrying multiple times a day now.
Every 1 hour during the week.
Great, fantastic. So, I mean, just to explain who I am and what I do, you may have seen me on ENCA, you might hear me from time to time on 702. I should explain that I have a background that is absolutely rooted in South Africa, because my mother is from Joburg, or was from Johannesburg. She passed away, unfortunately, just before Christmas. But she'd lived in the UK for 40 years, 50 years by the time she died, but grew up in Johannesburg and graduated from Wits. I actually was just in touch with Wits this week to get a copy of her graduation certificate. So South Africa is absolutely in my blood, and over the years, my company, which is an independent broadcast news agency, has had a very, very long relationship with both SABC and ENCA. I think we started working for SABC in about 96, something like that. We've been part of the tapestry there for at least 25 years, and then ENCA when it launched. So I run an independent broadcast news agency called Feature Story News, as I think some of you know. We are a small enterprise. I mean, we're a much larger enterprise than we were initially, but we still think of ourselves as a small enterprise. We have 35 offices around the world, which sounds much grander than it is, because some of those offices are 1- and 2-person operations. But we provide ready-to-air broadcasting content, mostly for English language stations, but not exclusively for English language stations, from all of those different locations for broadcasters internationally. And our clients range from the largest, wealthiest American television networks, Fox News. We had a piece on the PBS NewsHour last night, the public broadcasting system here in the United States, which is a big national broadcaster in America, all the way through to literally the smallest bedroom internet radio station. And our view has always been, from the moment that we started, that any broadcaster, it doesn't matter how small or large they are, that is interested in serious-minded international news coverage should be given an opportunity to receive that coverage from around the world by an organization that is not going to chase every single tabloid story going at the expense of covering serious news. So if you listen to our news bulletin today, you know, we've reflected on the fact that the United States says it wants to go back into the UN Human Rights Council. Donald Trump pulled it out. Joe Biden wants to go back in. We've got a feature today with David Attenborough speaking to the United Nations yesterday about the dangers of climate change. We covered the Tiger Woods story yesterday. And for some of our broadcast clients, you know, I did multiple live reports on that. But that is not sort of the meat and potatoes of what we do every day. We're interested in policy. We covered in the news bulletin that I did yesterday the uprising in the former Soviet Republic of Georgia after the opposition leader was arrested there. I mean, those are stories that are more normally covered, I think, by broadcasters like the BBC, for example, or SABC, which has preserved a very globally minded international outlook. But here in the United States, there's hardly any coverage of that kind of stuff. We are an American company, but as you can hear, I'm originally from the UK, and you'll hear that many people that are on our air are not from the United States. We have 9 bureaus across Africa. We have an office in Cape Town. We have bureaus in Dar es Salaam, in Accra. We've got coverage today on the news of the first COVAX vaccine shipments arriving in Accra from our correspondent who's based there. And these are all staff positions. It's not a collective of freelancers. We have a full-time cohort of about 90 people working for the company around the world. I got into all of this because the only thing I ever wanted to do from a very early age was be a journalist, and I was fascinated by the broadcast industry again from a very early age. I mean, I can trace my interest in pursuing all of this professionally to 1972, when I was 7 years old and the Munich Olympics were taking place. And very unusually for that period in Britain, because the Olympic Games were on, television started at breakfast time. Usually television didn't start until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And so being someone who enjoyed watching television, I would race downstairs and turn on the TV at 6:30 in the morning to watch the Olympic Games. And that was the Olympic Games when the Israeli team was held hostage by Palestinian gunmen and activists. And I remember racing upstairs and waking my mother up and asking her what, they were talking about Palestinian guerrillas on television, and I didn't understand what that meant. So I went up and asked her, what are gorillas? I thought, they were animals, apes. What are gorillas doing holding the Israeli Olympic team hostage? And my mother leapt out of bed, raced down the stairs to see what was going on. And I think looking back on it, I probably thought, that's kind of interesting. Being able to tell people things they don't already know is kind of an interesting, thing. So to cut a very, very long story short, because I've been doing this a long time now, I joined, when I left university, I worked for ITN in the UK, Independent Television News, which is the BBC's commercial competitor. I was with them for 3 years. I then joined an American organization. The Christian Science Monitor newspaper had set up a television arm, a broadcasting arm actually, that was providing 3 hours of content a day to National Public Radio in the US and a half-hour TV news program every night for the Discovery Channel in the US. So I joined Christian Science Monitor Broadcasting, was with them for 3 years, and then they scaled back dramatically their broadcasting operations. Like 400 of us were made redundant. By that point, I was living in Moscow. I was covering then President Boris Yeltsin's administration, having reported the whole collapse of the Soviet Union. And it was a fascinating time to be in Moscow. So I decided to stay and go freelance and see if I could spend a year at least covering costs by going freelance. And that is how Feature Story News came about, because we found that there were so many broadcasters who didn't have access to cost-effective coverage, particularly at the time from Russia, which was, obviously a huge story, the Soviet Union's collapse, Russia's rise, that we got very busy very quickly. And then I moved here to Washington almost 30 years ago, 28 years ago, to open an office here, not imagining that I would still be here 3 decades later. We're obviously speaking at a very difficult moment around the world because of the pandemic. I am in my garage at home. I have been working from home for almost a month. I was traveling actually until February the 28th last year, when I came back to Washington because of the pandemic. I was in Istanbul visiting clients. And then I think by about March the 12th, we'd shut the office up, and our whole operation has moved to home functioning. If I am careful with this computer and I don't lose audio, you can see there, that is my live backdrop of the White House. So if you see me on ENCA later today or tomorrow, I'll be sitting in front of that huge plasma screen. And I have a camera in a cupboard over there. Behind that door is a camera. I should have left it open, but there's a camera in there pointing at the plasma, and I've got a professional set of lights in here. Now, I had all of this before the pandemic. And I guess the burden that, you know, one of the messages, or the key message I would sort of convey is our viewpoint as a broadcast news agency. We are a minnow, if you like, in the broadcast news agency business, up against much larger players: Reuters Television, Associated Press Television News, Agence France Presse TV. And the way in which we have succeeded as a business is by constantly embracing every technological opportunity that comes along. So we were the first news agency in the broadcast industry to tell our clients that they no longer needed to book very expensive satellites to get our material on the air. We would provide it via the internet. SABC actually played a pioneering role in that. There was a very, very early huge piece of equipment. Now it was like a computer server, and we took it to SABC, and they installed it in their newsroom, and you could finish a television news report in Washington at 7 o'clock at night here, and you could set this system to feed the video through to South Africa, and by the time it was sort of 4 o'clock in the morning in Washington, so, you know, approaching the lunchtime news bulletins in South Africa, the piece would arrive. And this was revolutionary. I mean, now you can get it there in minutes, but in those days it took hours because the bandwidth was so slow. But it was absolutely revolutionary because it meant that SABC could take a daily piece from Washington, where previously that would have incurred a $1,500 satellite cost to get the piece beamed up and beamed down to Joburg on a satellite. So we have aggressively stayed in front of the technology. We started putting smaller cameras in the hands of some of our journalists and training them in how to shoot and how to edit. So we became very multi-skilled. This home studio I built here with my colleagues. I didn't build it. My technically minded colleagues built this about 3 or 4 years ago, because I was spending so much time on the air late into the evening, going into the broadcasts of our clients in Asia, where it was morning, that if I didn't have a home broadcasting facility, I was never going to be home, much to the irritation of the family. So this thing was already built. And it's all internet, it's all done over IP. Every broadcast I do, whether it's TV or radio, I've got a little radio production area over here on my desk. You can see in the corner there, I've got a portable Comrex box. So at the click of a button there, I can be live in full quality on 702 or Radio New Zealand or LBC. And it's been fascinating watching broadcasters around the world, high-end broadcasters, you know, CBS, NBC, ABC, dealing with a pandemic, suddenly realizing they had to have all their staff working from home and having absolutely no understanding that this kind of technology was actually deployable. It turned out to be quite good business for us. We set up home studios for a number of different broadcasters because we'd already been doing it for years. So I think the capacity to create incredibly high quality content at very cost-effective budgetary levels by harnessing yourselves, as I'm sure you're already doing anyway, to whatever new technology comes along, and then absolutely staying in front of the technological curve is vital. I mean, for us, it's the reason why our business has expanded, because we were going to our broadcast clients, SABC, CGTN of China, ITV News in the UK, PBS, and saying, look, there are just easier, cheaper ways of doing this without in any fashion putting the quality of the work at risk. In fact, not only are you not putting the quality of the work at risk, because it's so much easier, you can go to more places, you can find out more things, you can interview more people in a much more discreet fashion. When you're walking up to someone and trying to interview them on the street with a massive camera, and you've got a cameraman and a sound man and a producer and a reporter, it's a very intimidating prospect for people that you're trying to interview. Whereas if it's just you, you can gain so much more of an insight because you're not being intimidating at all. We also, when we're in the field, we do all our live broadcasting over iPhones. We have an iPhone proprietary app that we call FSN Live, and it will turn any iPhone 7 or above into a full high definition broadcast camera. And these new iPhones, I've got the iPhone, I think this is the 11 or the 12 here. The cameras on this thing are unbelievable quality. I mean, as good as any camera we were taking into the field, 15 years ago, and they're delivering full HD over very, very small amounts of broadband. So anytime you see a broadcast on SABC from one of our colleagues, maybe at the White House or on the streets of Accra or Dar es Salaam, that's all coming off an iPhone. And the viewer at home has no idea whatsoever that, this is all being done with the same kind of technology that they've got in their pockets. So I think that whatever the message is that you're trying to broadcast, the two most important things are to find an engaging way of presenting the content. And if you want to talk about that in questions, I'm more than happy to do it. You need to find a way of being engaging about the way you present content, being relevant, absolutely relevant all the time to your audiences, and finding really smart technological ways of getting your message into the hands of people at a time when, that aspect of what we do as broadcasters is absolutely exploding all the time. I'm sort of mindful of time, Sam. Do you want me to stop there and take questions? Is that
Yes,
a good?
absolutely. I would like the colleagues to ask questions. My first question would be, what does it take to become a Simon Marks? That will be my first question, and let's ask them to ask more questions.
My question would be, why would you want to be? I think you've got to be passionate about what you want to do. I mean, I love what I do. I never started this company because I wanted to be a businessman. I'm a terrible businessman. I'm very lucky. I've got a chief operating officer who basically runs the company, because I hate doing all of that stuff and I have really no interest in it. I wake up in the morning because I want to be on the radio and television, and I really enjoy it. Off the air, doing a live for a broadcaster in Singapore, Channel News Asia, talking all about Joe Biden. He's signing an executive order this afternoon about America's supply chain crisis. That the United States faces a supply chain crisis. It's not really an issue I know very much about. So I've spent the morning reading up about it and researching. And I love the fact that every morning when I wake up, I don't quite know what the day is going to bring. I enjoy sudden breaking news developments. I mean, I didn't enjoy from an emotional position the insurrection on the Capitol, but as it broke on January the 6th, we went into absolute open-ended live broadcasting mode, and there is something very exciting about covering a story like that for international audiences, because you know they're galvanized by it and they're watching and they can't believe what they're seeing, just as you can't believe, you know, as the reporter, you can't believe what you're seeing. So I've been unbelievably lucky in my life, because I got to do a job that I was passionate about, and I still get to do it every day. I've managed to live and travel all over the world as a result of this. You know, there's a former great, now sadly deceased, anchorman here in the US by the name of Peter Jennings, who was the anchor on ABC News. And he used to say that being a television journalist or a radio journalist was the greatest education, you know, life could give you, because it thrusts you into all of these unexplored, unknown waters, and you have to navigate them. And in my case, that's taken me to Moscow. It took me to Iraq for the war. In 2003, I've traveled through various parts of Africa. I've traveled extensively in Latin America. I've been lucky enough to interview, you know, American presidents, and when Thabo Mbeki was president of South Africa, I got to know him very well, because he would travel internationally, and I would invariably be part of that. So when he was deputy president coming here, I got to spend an enormous amount of time with him. You know, you meet fascinating people who in many ways inspire you or challenge you. And, you know, so life is as a result of that, professionally, incredibly full. And every day is exciting. A friend of mine who's the same age as me, recently retired from full-time work. And he's been in this business as long as I have. And I was thinking this morning, man, you know, really, retirement already? I'm not ready for that at all. Luckily, it's a long way away, Sam.
That's great. Colleagues, feel free to ask Simon any question you want to ask. George, I see you wanting.
Yeah, can I just ask a question that really relates to your background as someone who's well-traveled, who's seen upheavals in history, etc. And this relates to Capitol Hill, that is being described as a watershed moment. And prior to that, America had some semblance of moral high ground in relation to chastising misbehaving leaders across the world. After Capitol Hill, what is
So we lost you there, George. Can you repeat?
Oh yeah, I'm saying after Capitol Hill, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that Capitol Hill, in many ways, I think you're absolutely right to view it as a watershed. I think in many ways it was the inevitable end of a process that one can say is a 4-year process, but it was actually a longer process than that, because you can chart it all the way back to the emergence on the American political scene of what was known as the Tea Party within the Republican Party. Sarah Palin, the former governor of Alaska, when she was selected as a vice presidential candidate by John McCain, that brought extreme views within the Republican Party to the fore for the first time. And then Donald Trump's genius, in many ways, was to unleash people who had never been part of the political mainstream in the United States before, and to mainstream them. And so the idea that, you know, a crowd of people in America, in the United States of America, can be invade to attack the building that is the cradle of democracy in the United States, because they have falsely believed the false claims of the president of the United States, who has told them that the vice president of the United States, who was in the building at the time, had the power to overturn the outcome of the election, power that he absolutely did not have constitutionally. I mean, this is a seismic moment in the history of the country. Joe Biden is telling everybody America is back. I think the rest of the world will be entirely justified in saying, well, that's very nice, lovely, nice to have you back. How long are you staying? Because 74 million people voted for President Trump. And while they're not all supportive of him, as opposed to being supportive of the Republican Party, he speaks for millions and millions of people here in a society where the media has become completely shattered, in terms of people finding the message that they want from particular channels that speak to their own personal political prejudices. So people are disconnected from objective, unvarnished information. They hear what they want to hear. And in a situation where, these QAnon conspiracy believing supporters of President Trump have been activated by him, there is no guarantee that this is going to be anything more than a 4-year period that then sees even more upheaval further down the road. So the notion, as Ronald Reagan used to describe it, of America being the shining beacon on the hill, the shining city on the hill for the rest of the world to emulate, which, let's be frank, as international observers of America, we all know was completely overstated. But America's moral capacity at this point to speak out about a fraudulent election in Latin America, or what's taking place, for example, in parts of Africa or Georgia this week. I mean, that is really, really constrained now. And that's why you see other big players, China, Russia, Brazil, Turkey, India, South Africa, exercising more or seeking to exercise more influence on the world stage.
Wow. Interesting. That is a workshop on its own. As to what, as a journalist, how do you package such complex story? Thank you very much for answering it so detailed and so much clarity, and one wants to unpack it even further. Another question, colleague? Simon, your time is allowing to extend a bit.
Mr. Tsema, it's
I'm fine. I'm good for time.
Okay, good. Captain?
Simon, I just want to hear your take on Brexit. What's your take on Brexit, and do you think is it good for Africa as a continent? Thank you.
That's a very interesting question. I mean, my personal take on Brexit, not from a journalistic perspective, but from a purely personal viewpoint, is that it's not the outcome that I had hoped to see. But that's partly driven by the fact that I am a British passport holder. I'm not an American citizen. I've deliberately not become an American citizen. I want to be an outsider here, even after, nearly 3 decades in the United States. And the freedom of movement issue for me, in terms of my life, business travel, having offices in various parts of Europe, having 2 children who are British passport holders and, until recently could have gone to work in any European country without question and who now can't, is distressing. I think it creates opportunity without question for Africa. There's no question that a Britain outside the European Union is going to be more focused on deepening trade ties, for example, with South Africa, than it would have been when those trade negotiations were all being handled by the EU on its behalf. And I think that for countries in Africa, there is an opportunity there because Britain is going to be really eager to demonstrate that it has not just the capacity to negotiate these trade arrangements, but also can demonstrate to, and this will be very important for Boris Johnson, can demonstrate to Brexit supporters that there is meat on the bones of this claim that Britain is getting its sovereignty back. I mean, I've never fully shared the view that British sovereignty was somehow, you know, second rate because of our membership of the European Union, but that is definitely the view of passionate Brexit supporters. And so the more that the UK can do in terms of forging direct ties with countries like South Africa, and you know, there's always been, I mean, since the end of the apartheid era, substantial trade underway. I mean, I can remember growing up in the UK in the 70s when, you know, South African fruit was being boycotted, and it was still available in supermarkets, but people wouldn't touch it and wouldn't buy it, you know. That's all obviously changed in the intervening periods, but there's so much more that can be done in that relationship. And a Britain freed from the EU is going to be in a position to pursue those deals. And I think they can help the economies of Africa. And also it becomes more of a level playing field, which Lord knows there hasn't been a lot of in terms of the British historic relationship with the continent. So I think in all sorts of ways, it presents interesting opportunities.
Great. Ramabaka, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, sir. My question is probably even with Josh, is to inquire as to how long did it take for you to realize that you need to beef up your infrastructure capacity, to decide that now you have to have your home-based studio, which is technology driven, and how did that change, you know, your productivity and your capacity to be able to do more, you know, out of time that you used to travel?
You know, that's a really interesting question, because my life has been completely changed by the pandemic. I was spending at least a third of the year traveling, sometimes to produce news content, but a lot to go and visit our clients and negotiations and contracts and all of that kind of stuff. And that came to a sudden standstill. In terms of my daily output now, because I split my time between running the company, but also being on air, I get so much more done working from home than I ever did in an office. And while I know I'm going to have to go back to the office at some point, the ability to work in an environment where I'm not being interrupted or distracted, where I can leave breakfast upstairs and just wander down a flight of stairs and work here and then meet the kids for lunch and then come back down and crack on, has actually been quite liberating. But on the technology side, I mean, for our company, it's always been a very simple business decision. The more the opportunity for us has grown in the industry, the more we needed to create, to embrace smart technological solutions that would allow us to compete with those larger organizations that I mentioned. We were never going to have the money to rent satellite space or, you know, well, I'll put it in a different way. When I first moved here in 1993, we had to get a bank loan to buy one camera, and it cost us $75,000 to buy one camera. And I literally put everything into that bank loan because I knew that if we didn't have a camera, we couldn't possibly function. Today, I can buy probably a dozen fully kitted out camera kits for $75,000. So the growth of our business has come at a time when the barriers to entry have tumbled in the broadcasting industry. I can literally go and stand on the lawn of the White House with only this iPhone, a light, a microphone, and a tripod, and I can be broadcasting live into some of the biggest broadcast news channels anywhere on the planet. I mean, there's no barrier to entry there because I already have an iPhone, you know? And so once those barriers continued to fall, we were able to occupy a bigger and bigger niche within the industry, to the point where we're now, you know, a highly regarded player in the industry, and we've taken an enormous amount of work away, for example, from Associated Press Television News, because we do it smarter, we do it more cost effectively, we do it in a higher quality. They couldn't extract themselves from the satellite contracts that they were in, and from an old school kind of old-fashioned thought process about how you produce television. We were already way down the road when the pandemic hit, and so that's been hugely advantageous to us. And you know, in terms of my ability, just in practical terms, to hop off a stool where I'm sitting in front of my plasma screen doing television and immediately to come and sit here and put my headphones on and be on the radio 30 seconds later is amazing. Just unbelievable flexibility that one could never have had 20 years ago. And so it's transformed the way that I live and work, and it makes my days full and busy, but that's the way I enjoy my days.
Wow, Simon, beautiful story and inspirational one as well. I'm sure we would like to connect with you further as we sharpen our skills. We don't know where this group of people is going to end up in, other than being in radio. I can tell you that we are all beaten by the back, especially this internet radio station that runs on these new technologies. All what we need to connect with our clients or the guest is really a link to our virtual studio, and they just need to click on the link, and then the voice is there. So I think I will consolidate much more questions, I'm sure, from the Mini Lekgotla, and I will share that with you, and hopefully you will be able to answer them for us.
Absolutely. I'm very happy to do it. And if you want to do another session like this at some point, I'd be really delighted to do it. I think you're doing it at just at exactly the right moment, you know, because it is, as you say, not just easy to accomplish it technically, but easy to accomplish it with a very, very high degree of technical proficiency. So, you know, I mean, I listen to a whole variety of different radio stations, and whether I'm listening to the BBC World Service or some much smaller radio outlets that I happen to enjoy, the ability to produce programming that is of a network quality is at everyone's fingertips now. And that means you've got the ability in an internet world, online as a streaming internet station, to sound absolutely as polished and professional as any other station that's out there. And that's a very exciting prospect, I think.
Beautiful. And please pass my regards to all 90 odd bureaus, office. I don't know what you call them.
Bureaus.
Your bureaus of the FSN. We are proud to be part of the family. We're really enjoying top of the hour news. I don't know whether any of the colleagues here wants to comment on your reporting. I think we hear your voice almost every hour. And many of your bureaus.
Well, that's great.
We are grateful for your contribution. Thank you so much. We'll certainly invite you to come back for a much longer time and engage with you. Beautiful stuff.
I'll be very happy to do it, and good luck. And if anybody has any questions about any of it, please, you know, Sam has my email. Feel free to reach out. I'm always super happy to talk about this stuff.
Beautiful. And we will share your podcast with them as well.
Oh, terrific. Please do. That'd be great. Thank you, Sam. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mark.
Cheers. Have a great day. Have a great night there.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Sure. Beautiful. Okay, colleagues, we went over time by about 15 minutes, which is, I think it was necessary for us to do. We're going to allocate you to our Mini Lekgotlas, and you're going to spend some time reflecting on the points that Simon has raised and George has raised. But I also want you to reflect on the conduct of lecture 5, which conduct number 9, talks about follow-up. Number 10, that talks about challenge respectfully. Number 11 talks about debates and arguments. And then the last one, conduct number 12, talks about listening. Remember, we have about 32 conducts that we have to cover in the whole 14-module course. So by the end of the whole course, we will have really learned a lot from this practical engagement. So those of you who have been in the Lekgotla, please assist the colleagues that are attending Lekgotla for the first time. If you want us to share the manual with you, just let us know, and I will be able to share the manual with you. So let's take 5 minutes break, but when you come back, you will be going straight into your breakaway rooms. And there, somebody will step up and take the chairman or chairwomanship. That is the Lekgotla style. We don't dictate. We will find yourself in one room and you figure out how to appoint a leader and allocate the name to your group and why that name. And then you start the deliberations. We'll see you back top of the hour at 2000 hours when you then do a feedback. I think you have got enough content to digest in your mini Lekgotla. 5 minutes break, and then I will immediately after this start allocating you to your mini Lekgotla. Thank you.